When I handed Father Thomas that sealed envelope 3 hours before walking down the aisle, I never imagined the silence that would follow his words would be louder than any scream I could have unleashed. My fiancé David stood there in his perfect tuxedo, completely unaware that in minutes his world would crumble in front of 200 guests who thought they were witnessing the happiest day of my life. Before I take you through what happened that Sunday morning, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button, and if you're new here, subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself when it truly matters. Now let me take you back to how this nightmare began. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 28 years old, and I'm an architect from Denver, Colorado. 3 days ago, I thought I knew exactly what my future looked like. I was marrying David Reynolds, my college sweetheart of 6 years, in what was supposed to be the wedding of my dreams. My maid of honor was Jessica Parker, my best friend since high school, the person I trusted more than anyone in this world. The three of us had been inseparable since college, and Jessica had been there through every milestone of our relationship. Tuesday evening, 3 days before my wedding, I decided to surprise David at his apartment with his favorite Chinese takeout. We had agreed not to see each other the night before the rehearsal dinner to make the moment more special, but I was too excited to wait. I had gotten off work early and wanted to spend some quiet time together before the chaos of the wedding weekend began. I used my key to let myself in, balancing the food containers in one hand while fumbling with the lock. The apartment was dimmer than usual, with only the hallway light on. I could hear voices coming from the living room, David's voice and another voice I immediately recognized. Jessica's laugh echoed through the apartment, that same laugh I had heard 1,000 times during our girls' nights. "David, someone might see us," I heard her whisper, followed by the unmistakable sound of kissing. My heart stopped. The takeout containers slipped from my hands, crashing to the floor with a sound that seemed to echo forever. I stood there frozen, unable to process what I was hearing. This couldn't be happening. Not David, not Jessica, not 3 days before my wedding. I tiptoed closer to the living room, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. Through the partially open door, I saw them on the couch, my fiancé and my best friend, completely lost in each other. David's hands were tangled in Jessica's hair, the same hair I had helped her choose the perfect style for as my maid of honor. She was wearing the necklace I had given her as a bridesmaid gift. "Sarah will never find out," David whispered between kisses. "After Saturday, things will go back to normal between us. This is just our goodbye." Jessica pulled back slightly, her face flushed. "I can't believe we're doing this again. I feel so guilty, but I can't help myself around you." Again. The word hit me like a punch to the stomach. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This wasn't a one-time mistake. They had been doing this before. I backed away slowly, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I managed to reach the door without making another sound, leaving behind the mess of food containers. Once I was in the hallway, I leaned against the wall and tried to breathe. My entire world had just collapsed, and they had no idea. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with a million thoughts. How long had this been going on? How many times had Jessica looked me in the eye and lied? How many times had David kissed me after being with her? The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain I had ever experienced. But here's what surprised me the most. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. I was calculating. By the time I reached my apartment, I had made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to cancel the wedding. I was going to let them think they had gotten away with it, because I had a much better plan in mind. Wednesday morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't expected. I woke up with a strange sense of calm, like the eye of a hurricane. My phone was buzzing with messages from Jessica about last-minute wedding preparations, each text making my stomach turn with its fake enthusiasm and concern. "Can't wait to stand by your side tomorrow, babe. You're going to be the most beautiful bride ever." I stared at her message for a long time before typing back, "Thank you for being such an amazing friend. I couldn't do this without you." The irony wasn't lost on me. That afternoon, I drove to St. Mary's Cathedral for our final meeting with Father Thomas. He was a kind man in his 60s who had known my family for years and had specifically requested to perform our ceremony. David was supposed to meet me there, but he texted saying he was running late, probably with Jessica, I thought bitterly. Father Thomas welcomed me into his office with his usual warm smile. Sarah, my dear, you look radiant. Are you ready for the big day? Father, I need to ask you something, and I need you to trust me completely, I said, sitting across from his desk. During the ceremony, right before you ask if anyone objects to this union, I'm going to hand you an envelope. I need you to read what's inside out loud to everyone. His eyebrows furrowed with concern. Sarah, that's quite unusual. What's this about? I looked him directly in the eyes. There are things about my fiancé that our guests need to know before they witness what they believe will be a sacred union. I can't go into details now, but I'm asking you to trust me. Will you do this? Father Thomas studied my face for a long moment. He had counseled many couples over the years and probably recognized the look of someone who had been deeply hurt. Are you certain this is the right path, my child? Perhaps we should discuss— I'm certain, I interrupted gently. And Father, please don't mention this conversation to David when he arrives. He nodded slowly. I'll do as you ask, but I want you to know that whatever happens, my prayers are with you. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote the letter that would change everything. I wrote it, rewrote it, and wrote it again, making sure every word was perfect. It needed to be factual, direct, and impossible to deny. I folded it carefully and placed it in a plain white envelope. David came over that night with flowers and wine, acting like the perfect loving fiancé. He talked about how excited he was for our honeymoon, how he couldn't wait to call me his wife. Every word felt like poison in my ears, but I smiled and played my part perfectly. I love you so much, Sarah, he said, pulling me close. You're everything to me. I know exactly what I mean to you, I replied, and he completely missed the double meaning. Jessica called around 10 to go over the timeline for the next day. We talked about hair appointments, photo schedules, and which flowers went where. She sounded so normal, so excited to be my maid of honor. At one point, she even said, Sarah, I'm so happy you chose me for this. You're like a sister to me. The audacity was breathtaking. Thursday flew by in a whirlwind of final preparations. The rehearsal dinner went perfectly. David was charming, Jessica was helpful, and everyone commented on what a perfect couple we made. My parents were glowing with happiness, David's family was welcoming me with open arms, and our friends were celebrating what they thought would be the beginning of our beautiful life together. I went to bed that night with the envelope on my nightstand, knowing that in less than 12 hours, I would either be married to a faithful man or free from a lying one. Either way, the truth would finally come out, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to unleash. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect October day that brides dream about. I woke up surprisingly rested, with a strange sense of peace that I hadn't felt in days. Today, one way or another, my questions would be answered. My bridal suite at the hotel was bustling with activity. My mother, my sister, and Jessica were all there, helping with last-minute preparations. Jessica looked stunning in her deep purple bridesmaid dress, her hair perfectly styled, playing the role of devoted best friend to perfection. Sarah, you look absolutely radiant, she said, helping me into my dress. David is the luckiest man alive. I caught her eye in the mirror. Thank you, Jess, for everything. The photographer captured every moment. Jessica adjusting my veil, my mother fastening my grandmother's pearl necklace, all of us laughing at something my sister said. If anyone looked at these photos later, they would see what appeared to be the happiest morning of my life. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Can't wait to see you at the altar, my beautiful wife-to-be. I love you more than words can say. I typed back, see you soon. This will be a day no one will ever forget. At 2:30, we arrived at St. Mary's Cathedral. The church was decorated exactly as I had envisioned. White roses and baby's breath everywhere, candles lining the aisle, soft music playing as guests took their seats. Everything was perfect for what everyone believed would be a fairy tale wedding. I could see David at the altar through the bridal room window, looking handsome in his black tuxedo, chatting nervously with his best man. He kept checking his watch and smoothing his hair, the picture of an anxious groom. Jessica stood with the other bridesmaids, occasionally glancing toward the altar with an expression I now recognized as longing. Father Thomas appeared in the doorway of the bridal room. Sarah, it's time. Are you ready? I reached into my purse and pulled out the white envelope, handing it to him discreetly. Remember what we discussed? He nodded solemnly and tucked it into his vestments. The music changed to the wedding march, and my heart began to pound. not with joy, but with anticipation. My father appeared at my side, beaming with pride. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he whispered, taking my arm. "I'm so proud of you." The doors to the sanctuary opened, and I began the longest walk of my life. Every step down that aisle felt deliberate, purposeful. I could see David's face light up as he saw me, his hand over his heart in that gesture I used to find endearing. Jessica smiled at me from her position at the altar, giving me a small wave. 200 guests stood as I passed, all of them thinking they were witnessing the beginning of my happily ever after. My work colleagues, college friends, family members who had traveled from across the country, they were all here to celebrate what they believed was true love. I reached the altar and took my place next to David. He leaned over and whispered, "You're the most beautiful bride I've ever seen. I'm so lucky." "We'll see about that," I whispered back, but he was too nervous to catch the meaning in my tone. Father Thomas began the ceremony with his usual grace, speaking about love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage. I barely heard the words, focused entirely on the moment that was coming. Jessica stood just a few feet away, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, playing the emotional best friend perfectly. "Marriage is built on trust, honesty, and faithfulness," Father Thomas continued, and I saw David nod seriously. "It is a commitment not just between two people, but before God and all these witnesses." The ceremony proceeded normally through the readings and the blessing of the rings. David's hands were shaking slightly as he held mine, which I had always attributed to nerves. Now I wondered if it was guilt. Finally, Father Thomas reached the moment I had been waiting for. "Before we continue with the exchange of vows," he announced, "I must ask if there is anyone present who knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony." This was it. I reached into my bouquet, where I had hidden a second copy of the envelope, and handed it directly to Father Thomas, just as we had planned. The gesture was subtle enough that most guests probably didn't notice, but I saw Jessica's eyes narrow slightly with confusion. Father Thomas took the envelope, his expression grave. "It appears we have a matter that must be addressed before we can proceed." The sanctuary fell completely silent. David looked confused, glancing between me and the priest. Jessica's face had gone pale, and then Father Thomas opened the envelope and began to read the words that would change everything. "Dear family and friends," Father Thomas began, his voice carrying clearly through the silent sanctuary. "What I am about to read was given to me by the bride, Sarah Mitchell, who has asked that these words be shared with all of you before this ceremony continues." I could feel David's confusion beside me, his grip on my hand tightening. Behind him, Jessica had gone completely white, her bouquet trembling in her hands. Father Thomas continued reading. "3 days ago, I discovered that my fiancé, David Reynolds, and my maid of honor, Jessica Parker, have been having an intimate relationship behind my back. This is not a moment of weakness or a single mistake. I heard them discuss how this was happening again and how they plan to continue their deception after our wedding. The collective gasp that went through the sanctuary was like a physical force. I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath behind me, someone's whispered, "Oh my God," and the rustling of 200 people shifting in their seats. David's face went from confusion to horror to panic in the span of seconds. "Sarah, what is this? What are you doing?" But Father Thomas wasn't finished. "I stand here today not to be married under false pretenses, but to ensure that everyone who came here believing they were witnessing true love knows exactly what kind of man David Reynolds is and what kind of friend Jessica Parker has been to me." Jessica tried to speak. "Sarah, please, I can explain." "There is nothing to explain," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the microphone system. "I heard everything. I saw everything. And everyone here deserves to know the truth before they congratulate you on your performance today." The sanctuary had erupted into whispers and shocked murmurs. I could see people turning to each other, phones being discreetly pulled out, the wedding photographer still capturing everything with a look of absolute shock on his face. David grabbed my arm, his face desperate. "Sarah, please, we can talk about this privately." "Don't do this here." "Privately?" I laughed, and the sound was bitter even to my own ears. "Like you and Jessica have been handling things privately? How long, David? How long have you been lying to my face?" "Sarah, please." Jessica stepped forward, tears streaming down her face, but I held up my hand. Don't Don't you dare try to make this about your guilt or your tears. You stood in my bridal room an hour ago and helped me into this dress. You've been planning my bachelorette party, my bridal shower, pretending to be my best friend while sleeping with my fiancé. The silence in the church was deafening. I could see my father starting to stand, his face red with anger, while my mother sat frozen in shock. David's parents looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. Father Thomas closed the letter and looked at David with disappointment. "Son, is what Sarah has written true?" David's shoulders sagged in defeat. The fight went out of him completely. "Yes," he whispered, but the microphone picked it up. "Yes, it's true." More gasps, more whispers. Someone in the back row said loudly, "I can't believe this is happening." "How long?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. David couldn't meet my eyes. 2 years, he said quietly. 2 years. 2 years of lies, of betrayal, of making me feel like I was going crazy when I sensed something was wrong, but couldn't put my finger on it. 2 years of Jessica consoling me when I worried that David seemed distant, all while she was the reason for that distance. I turned to Jessica, who was sobbing openly now. "And you? My best friend since high school? You helped me pick out this dress. You threw me a bridal shower. You've been lying to my face for 2 years? Sarah, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I never meant for it to happen. I tried to end it so many times, but you didn't," I interrupted. "You chose him over our friendship every single time. You chose to betray me rather than be honest with me." I turned back to the congregation, all 200 faces staring at me with a mixture of shock, admiration, and pity. "I want to thank everyone for being here today. You came here believing you were witnessing the beginning of a marriage built on love and trust. Instead, you've witnessed the end of 2 relationships built on lies." I began pulling off my engagement ring, the beautiful solitaire that David had presented to me 2 years ago, in what I now realized was probably guilt over starting his affair with Jessica. "Sarah, wait," David said desperately. "We can work through this. I love you. I want to marry you." I looked at him with all the disgust I felt. "You love me? You've been sleeping with my best friend for 2 years, and you love me? You plan to continue this affair after our wedding, and you love me?" The ring came off finally, and I held it up for everyone to see. "This ring represents a promise that was broken long before today. David, you can keep it as a reminder of what honesty might have saved." I dropped it at his feet, where it bounced once on the marble floor with a small metallic sound that seemed to echo through the silent church. Father Thomas stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. "I think it's clear that this ceremony cannot continue. Perhaps it's best if everyone gives the families some privacy to process what has happened here today." But I wasn't done. I had one more thing to say. "Before everyone leaves," I announced, "I want you all to know that I don't regret this. I don't regret exposing the truth. I would rather be humiliated here, in front of all of you, than live a lie for the rest of my life. I would rather be alone than be with someone who could look me in the eye every day, knowing he was betraying me." I turned to leave, then paused and faced the congregation one more time. And for anyone wondering if I could have handled this differently, yes, I could have. I could have confronted them privately. I could have canceled the wedding quietly. But they made the choice to lie to me, to humiliate me in private for 2 years, so I made the choice to reveal the truth publicly. Sometimes, the only way to stop being a victim is to stop protecting the people who are hurting you. The sanctuary was completely silent as I walked back down the aisle, my wedding dress rustling with each step. But this time, I wasn't walking toward a future of lies. I was walking toward my freedom. And you know what? As I reached those church doors and heard the chaos erupting behind me, David calling my name, Jessica sobbing, our families and friends trying to process what they had just witnessed, I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years. I felt like myself again. If you found this story as shocking as I did to live through, let me know in the comments below. Have you ever had to expose a betrayal publicly? How did you handle it? Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about standing up for yourself when it matters most. Because sometimes, the only way to save yourself is to stop saving face.